Today, I'm going to talk about bread. Most of us have eaten bread, like bread, but I'm going to tell you what kind of bread you should avoid if you want to actually protect your health and what you should be eating instead. All right. Now, I'm actually somebody who does like bread. And you probably heard like me that, bread is full of carbohydrates. You got to avoid bread. But I can tell you in moderation, bread can actually be pretty healthy and it tastes great too. So we're going to spend some time talking about what kind of bread is healthiest, but let's start by talking about the kind of bread you should avoid and why. Ready? Let's go. Okay, first of all, where do most of us get bread, right? Now, if you live in the French countryside or Italy, you might be lucky enough to actually walk to your local baker in the morning and get freshly baked bread. Most of us don't, all right? Most of us live near a grocery store, and we go to the grocery store to buy most of our stuff, most of our food, and you go to the bread section to buy bread, all right? And that's where the problem actually begins. So let's talk about the most common kinds of bread that you find in the grocery store. And the problem that starts is because most of them are mass-produced, factory-made, ultra-processed foods, all right? Now, you know already that ultra-processed foods aren't good. And when bread, which could be very easily baked, right? You think about it. If you actually make the dough, make it rise, and put it in the oven and bake it, that's it. It's been done for thousands of years, right? It's a rustic tradition. Nope. That's not a factory. The factory actually has to machine it and add all kinds of stuff to it. And that's where you actually get the problems. Refined flour and added sugar and all these additives and chemical preservatives. These are all things that you don't want to have in your body. All right. So I want to actually kind of unpack this for you and help you take a closer look at what some of the problems are with grocery store factory made bread. All right. Now, the first thing is that when you walk into the grocery store, right, I always tell people, first go to the produce section, see what's fresh, what's seasonal, load all that up there. Now you know you got the good stuff that you should be getting before you go anywhere else, all right? But eventually you're probably going to get to that bread section. And there's two choices usually in today's bakeries or grocery stores. Number one, a lot of grocery stores have their own bakery, and you can just buy bread that might have been made there. Or you kind of go and look at the shelf and it's like a library of bread, stack after stack after stack after stack of these plastic sleeves with square breads that are in this giant rectangle. They've been pre-sliced. Sound familiar? Yeah, I grew up with that stuff too. All right. Now, here's the thing. Those breads in a plastic sleeve that's got that little square plastic tie to cinch it, the pre-sliced stuff, tends to last a long time. Who knows how long it's been sitting on that shelf? And even though it's bread, it might have little or no fiber. And fiber is what we're generally looking for as part of most of our diet now in order to be able to feed our gut microbiome, okay? That's our healthy gut bacteria. You and I, we got 39 trillion healthy bacteria that's in our gut. Those healthy bacteria do a lot of things for us. They actually help us lower inflammation. They help our insulin sensitivity work well. So we've got good blood sugar control. They help to lower our cholesterol. These are the best statins there are. They actually live already in our gut. All right. They can help us heal from the inside out. They can text message our brain, the gut bacteria. Lots of things these gut bacteria does if you have a good, healthy gut microbiome. And dietary fiber is what you really want. And here's the thing, is that most factory-made breads missing the fiber. So you're missing an opportunity. You're getting the carbs, but you're missing the fiber. And that's why the traditional white bread, you've probably heard about that used in a derogatory sense. Hey, that white bread. Well, the white bread that most of us grew up with, missing this opportunity for crucial health using dietary fiber for our metabolism to lower inflammation from chronic disease. All right. So you actually want that dietary fiber missing in factory-made bread. Now, I did mention to you as well that factory bread often has added sugar. What am I talking about? Most breads don't taste that sweet. Yeah, but if you actually look at the ingredients, so anytime you take that plastic package, that sleeve, go and pick it up and look in the ingredients. And I bet you'll actually find in a lot of different choices of products, you'll find sugar added in there somewhere. Why do you need some sugar? All right, you need that much sugar. Well, factories will add the sugar, of course, to make the bread taste a little bit better, but it's kind of an unnecessary ingredient, right? They're not going to get that in a rustic French bakery or Italian bakery. All right, so whenever possible, try to avoid added sugar. What I'm telling you is that, like, you have choices. That's the key thing. And so rather than go for the plastic sleeves, go for the fresh bake that doesn't actually have added sugar. You know by now, added sugar, if you have too much of it, contributes to insulin resistance. And bread is like a gigantic carb anyway. Loaf of carbs, all right? So why would you want carbs on carbs? If you do this too much, it's going to overwhelm your metabolism, all right? And, there's a long tradition where people are actually serving bread with some meals. There's nothing really wrong with that, but it's the amount and what's in the bread that can make the difference. If you overload carbs into your body, you're going to start to grow excess body fat because the food that we eat, including carbs, it's just fuel for our body, and our body will store that fuel in our fuel tanks, which are our fat cells. And too much food, too much fuel will start to fill up those fat fuel tanks and grow new fuel tanks. And now you're going to wind up accumulating extra body fat and gain weight. And excess fat is inflammatory, which then sets you up for chronic disease. So, all right, that's one of the reasons why we're always trying to be very, very careful about the carbs that we're choosing to eat and how much and what else is in there. All right. So always look at the ingredient label, check if there's added sugar. And by the way, sometimes the added sugar comes under the name cane sugar or molasses, all ways of adding extra sweetness into the bread. Anything you buy in a package in a grocery store, for sure, in any case, you should be checking that ingredient label. All right. You got to be an informed consumer. All right. What are some of the other things that you want to look for on these plastic sleeves of factory-made bread that you find in the grocery store? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this. There's other ingredients, additives, part of refined ingredients that factories add into bread. Here's some of them. Maltodextrin, tapioca starch. And these are often added to mass breads in order to give the bread a fluffy texture. They also help to make the bread last longer on the shelf, right? So just like added sugar, they're unnecessary ingredients and carbs that put a burden on your metabolism, right? So in fact, if you look at a bread made at a traditional bakery, you're never going to see a fluffy loaf of bread, that squeezable bread. You're not going to be seeing that. But that's actually what is happening in a factory. That's not how real traditional healthier breads are actually made. So here's some other things to spot on the ingredient label of factory made bread. Look for preservatives, all right? Chemical preservatives. This bread is going to sit on a shelf for a long time before someone's going to buy it. Emulsifiers, thickeners that actually give the bread that kind of this texture, and stabilizers so the bread doesn't fall apart on the shelf, all right? These chemicals are designed to keep the bread from going stale too quickly and hold its shape and hold its flavor. So think about it. Bread made in a factory, going to be made somewhere far away from wherever you live. It's got to be packaged, all right, in that plastic sleeve and sealed. And it's going to go onto a truck. And then it's going to be driven to a store or put onto a train or maybe even an airplane. And then once it arrives at the store, it's going to be stored in the back until it's time to stock the front of the store. It's brought to the shelf. It sits there for as long as it needs to, maybe days, maybe week, maybe longer than a week, all right? And that's what these additives are there for. Not just to make the bread taste good, but they put additives to make that bread last a long time, all right? And by the way, these additives are now becoming more and more clear with research that they can interfere with your gut microbiome. Again, gut microbiome, good gut health, good brain health, good heart health. You start messing with your gut microbiome with unnecessary ingredients, that's a risk you shouldn't take, all right? So those are reasons why you don't want to have mass-produced, factory-made bread, all right? So there's a few other ingredients I got to tell you about that you can commonly found in factory produced bread. All right. I'm not even going to tell you what they do. All right. Or what they're for. They just shouldn't be in your body. You want that list? All right. Here it goes. Calcium propionate, sodium sterolactylate, azodicarbonamide, ADA, potassium bromate, high fructose corn syrup. Ugh, that you definitely don't want to have. You probably recognize that. Soy lecithin. That's a ultra processed form of soy. All right. Well, here's one. How about this? Sodium metabisulfite. Look, I can say them because I am a biochemist, so I can actually speak these tongue twisters. But if you can't pronounce something on an ingredient label of a factory-produced bread, you probably don't want that in your body. All right? These are exactly the types of additives that we're finding out damage our gut microbiome. And when our gut is not healthy, the rest of our body's not healthy. Our inflammation goes up, our immune system goes down, our metabolism gets derailed. Our blood sugar is harder to actually maintain, and blood cholesterol starts to rise. Everything in the wrong direction, right? And look, I'm not just blaming factory loaf bread. I'm just trying to get across to you that when you got a choice between, bread made that day with a minimum number of ingredients, all right, versus factory made bread, there's a reason why the old ways, the traditional ways, are going to be a lot better. Now, there's one more thing you got to know about factory-made bread. It can actually have a lot of salt. All right, let's talk about this. Now, factory-made breads have a surprisingly high sodium content. Sodium, salt, okay, sodium chloride, that's salt. Now, eating too much salt, actually really bad for your health, your cardiovascular system. Causes high blood pressure. High blood pressure increases your risk of a heart attack and stroke. High blood pressure also strains your kidney, all right? Not good for your blood vessels. You got 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in your body. You want to keep those healthy, all right? And a lot of people don't realize this, but even though bread doesn't taste salty, all right, overtly salty, it doesn't taste like a potato chip, but bread can actually be a hidden source of sodium. So if you're trying to cut down on your sodium, check out your bread. See if there's any sodium in your bread. Like usually when you're making a homemade bread, put a little pinch of salt, not a shaker full of salt, all right? So just be careful if you're going to buy factory-made bread. Just because it doesn't taste salty doesn't mean doesn't have a lot of sodium there. All right. Now, having said all this, all right, should we actually take a look at breads that are good for us? I'm going to tell you what kind of breads that you should look for. But before I do that, I want to say one more thing, and that is, a lot of times you go to an event or you go to a restaurant. Particularly those takeout places, you don't know where their bread comes from, right? I mean, some restaurants will bake their own bread. Most of them don't. How do you know the bread that you're being served isn't a mass-produced, factory-made bread with all that kind of stuff? You go to a deli to order a deli sandwich. If they don't bake their bread or have their bread delivered from a bakery, it's probably, that a loaf of coming from out of a plastic sleeve, a factory-produced bread. This is certainly the kind of thing that you're going to be getting in any type of mass production chain sandwich store. It's going to be made in mass because that's actually what's cheaper and easier to ship around and then very consistent for the brand. So this is actually why you got to be really careful when you're going out. I mean, let's say you go to a ball game and you're going to get a hot dog, all right? Now, a hot dog isn't good for you, but I can tell you the bun that they serve it on, that's definitely mass-produced, factory-made bread. I'm not telling you to buy a hot dog at a ball game. What I'm telling you is that the bread that you would get at a concession stand is probably going to be mass produced and have all those limitations that I just gave you as well. All right. Some of the nicer restaurants, sometimes they'll make their own bread, or maybe they'll have a partnership with a bakery. Really worthwhile asking, right? Because how many times have you gone to a restaurant and, the waiter automatically puts some bread out, or say, would you like some bread on the table? And a lot of people say, yeah, I'll have some bread. All right. That's where you don't know where that bread came from. Besides the fact that they might actually put old bread back onto your plate as well. Okay. So hopefully I've told you about sort of the breads to avoid. But now let's turn our attention to some of the breads that you just might want to include. All right. What are some of the breads that are better for your health? Ready? Well, try this one. Sourdough bread. one of my favorite breads. All right. Now, this is a very, very traditional, old medieval style bread. Okay. And it'll come in a loaf. It's kind of brown on the outside. It's got little cracks on it. When you cut it open, it's kind of crusty on the outside. Cut it open, you smell it inside. It smells really great. It's got a little tangy flavor to it. All right. I'm going to explain to you that tanginess is what makes it really good. Because it's a bread that's made with a starter bacteria that's healthy, that's called Lactobacillus reuteri. L. reuteri, Lactobacillus. Now, what is Lactobacillus reuteri? It's a healthy bacteria that used to be found in all of our guts. It's a healthy gut bacteria. It's also found in different kinds of food products. But researchers have actually discovered, and I'm one of those researchers, that Lactobacillus reuteri can actually help to fight tumors from growing. It boosts your immune system and gets your immune system strong. It actually lowers inflammation. All right. All the things that good, healthy gut bacteria does. Helps you heal from the inside out. We did a research experiment, a collaboration with the scientists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where we had full thickness wounds on the back of these lab mice, and you just had them drink water that had Lactobacillus reuteri just in the water. And guess what? Compared to the mice that were just drinking plain distilled water, if there was a probiotic with Lactobacillus reuteri in the drinking water, it doubled the rate of wound healing, and it upped the production of the protein growth factor that helps those healthful, useful blood vessels growing that would actually seal the wound shut. All right. So good for healing. All right. Lactobacillus reuteri. That's actually the starter bacteria used in sourdough bread. And by the way, lactobacillus, right? What does it do? It makes lactic acid, and lactic acid is kind of tangy. And so lactobacillus reuteri making lactic acid is what makes sourdough tangy. All right. Really, really important that the same bacteria is used for sourdough bread is actually useful for immune defenses. It also helps fight off bacteria, infections, and tumor growth. Oh, you know what? There was some other interesting research on Lactobacillus reuteri that showed that it actually slows down cellular aging, okay, by improving telomere length and slowing down aging of skin, for example. It actually made hair grow more robustly and faster, right? So that was kind of a surprise in research. This is lab research. Give lab mice Lactobacillus reuteri to eat, they're going to grow hair faster, more hair. And guess what they're going to grow? Their hair that grows is shinier hair, better texture, looks better, looks healthier. Pretty cool. And so that's another reason why eating Lactobacillus reuteri or foods made with it like sourdough bread can actually be really, really helpful. Now, one of the reasons I like to talk about this is because I'm a cancer researcher, and I was very, very surprised to see that Lactobacillus reuteri, okay, when it's consumed, in this case as a probiotic in a research study, actually fights cancer growth. Now, how does that work? Well, it turns out that gut bacteria, like Lactobacillus reuteri, talks to the immune system. A lot of people don't realize this, but 70% of your immune system is found in the wall of your gut. Now, your gut is like a garden hose, right? So think about a garden hose like this. Now, imagine you take a pair of garden shears and cut that garden hose off and take a look right down the middle of it. You'll see that it's got a wall right around the garden hose. And it turns out that the gut bacteria is inside the hole and the immune system's inside the wall of the gut. All right? Now, what happens? Healthy gut bacteria talk to the immune system. They talk like college roommates, shouting each other through a very thin dorm wall. Hey, what do you want on your pizza tonight? Oh, I think I'm going to have, mushrooms and peppers. So this is actually how the communication happens between gut bacteria and your immune system. Now, when you actually get good, healthy gut bacteria, they're giving good instructions to your immune system. And that immune system conducts surveillance in your bloodstream. Immune cells go out into your bloodstream and they're cruising around just like cops on a beat, like police in a suburban neighborhood, very peaceful, quiet suburban neighborhood, just looking for problems, right? usually everything looks pretty good, except that, every now and then you see that suspicious dude, maybe that drug dealer, sitting on the street corner, might not even be dealing drugs, but looks kind of shady. All right. Going to shake down that guy, see if he's got anything. All right. And he's actually got some paraphernalia and has some drugs on him. What do the police do? They stick him in the back of the paddy wagon and take him away. And that's basically what your immune system does when it's conducting surveillance for microscopic cancers in your body. So this is why getting a good, healthy gut bacteria microbiome is really, really important. It talks to your immune system. Your immune system then is better able to conduct surveillance. And not only are they actually, protecting you from invaders from the outside of your body, like bacteria and viruses during flu and cold season, but they're also cruising through your bloodstream, looking around for any of those microscopic cancers that might be growing that actually could be tackled and taken care of to prevent clinical cancers from ever forming. All right. That's how important a bacteria, a good healthy bacteria is. And Lactobacillus reuteri, which is used as a starter for sourdough bread, does that function. All right. So sourdough bread, consider it kind of a probiotic bread. Now, some people would say, as I did, wait a minute, you're baking bread like it's at 400 degrees, doesn't it kill all the bacteria? Yep, it does. All right. But guess what? The same lab at Massachusetts Institute of Technology that looked at Lactobacillus reuteri, they basically found that even if you take Lactobacillus reuteri and you smash it into 1,000 pieces. Now, how do you do that? Well, in the lab, we take something called a sonicator. All right. And it takes sound waves and you aim it right at that bacteria. All right. It's kind of like a Marvel Comics hero that can actually beam destructive sound energy, smash that bacteria into thousands of pieces. All right. Dead, right? Okay. Now you take that and you put it in drinking water. Remember I told you about the lab mice. Guess what? The Lactobacillus reuteri fragments made from disintegrated bacteria has the same beneficial effect as the intact bacteria. So it's something in there, doesn't have to be alive, still actually gives you that benefit. All right. So even sourdough bread, even baked, that's okay. You're still getting the fragments in there that seem to actually work. Now, here's something you got to be careful about. Again, when you're actually going to the grocery store to get factory-made sourdough bread, should you get that or not? All right? Because that also comes in a plastic sleeve sometimes. You can get the sourdough version. And the answer is be very, very careful because some factory-produced sourdough breads are trying to save time and save money. They don't use Lactobacillus reuteri. It's not a genuine sourdough bread. You know what they do to give that tangy flavor? They just make white bread. They add a little vinegar to it, give it that slightly tangy, sour taste to it. Now they call it sourdough bread because, well, it's a little sour. They skip the Lactobacillus reuteri step. More expensive, takes longer. They cut those corners. Guess what? You don't get the good stuff. This is why, you're not going to see Lactobacillus reuteri on the side of the package. All right. That's just a starter they use for the dough. But if you see vinegar or acetic acid in the ingredient label, watch out. You're being hoodwinked. Those are not the real sourdough bread. All right. In any case, I personally avoid factory made breads whenever I can. All right. Okay. Let's talk about the next beneficial loaf of bread. What kind? Whole grain bread, of course, right? Whole grains contain fiber, and it's whole grains, not refined. All right. White bread is refined, made with the flour. Whole grains contains a dietary fiber, which is exactly what our gut bacteria need. But what are these whole grains, right? That's a big question. Well, whole grains could be a whole variety of different types of grains. And this is where, you just need to learn how to recognize on the label what kinds of grains they are, or at least to be able to ask the question, right? So what kind of whole grain is whole grain bread made out of? Well, it could be whole grain wheat, could be barley, could be rye, it could be cornbread, could be rice, brown rice bread, could be quinoa, could be triticale, could be millet, could be teff, could be sorghum, right? So these are some of the things that you might actually read about on the side of whole grain bread, or this is what in a traditional bakery, they're making whole grain bread. They're going to be their dough is going to be made with this, and they might even sprinkle some of the stuff inside the bread itself. All right. Just be careful. Like many factory made breads, especially that claim to be whole grain, are only partially filled with whole grain. All right. Multi-grain. Just be careful. They can still have refined flour. You want to get the real stuff in whenever you can. All right. Here's another example of a good bread to try. Sprouted grain bread. Now, this is the whole grain, but the thing is that before the bread was being made, the grain was allowed to sprout. Now, why is that important? Because sprouted grains actually contain different levels of these micronutrients, polyphenols. And the grains get started, to germinated, they start sprouting even before they're used into the baking process. So this is just a couple of examples of things that you might want to consider when you're actually getting healthier bread. Now, I'm also going to tell you that there are some, let's call them good habits or best practices if you're going to eat bread. So it's not just buy the bread. Once you bring it in, what's the best way to eat it? What are some of the healthiest ways to eat it? What are some of the considerations? Well, I'll tell you, the first consideration I'm going to point out is just quantity of the bread you eat, right? You ever go to a restaurant and you're really, really hungry and, you're waiting for the waiter to come take your order, but they bought bread. You might sit there and eat it all because you're hungry, all right? And then you ask him to bring some more bread, and then you eat that. Okay, can I have another plate? You've filled up your half your stomach with bread, the serving of the bread, all right? So portion control is really, really important. The quantity of bread you eat, it should be really managed so that it's just moderate. Be modest with the amount of bread that you eat. Even a healthy food, too much of a healthy food can be unhealthy, right? And here's the thing about portion control, what I always talk about, is that all food we have is the energy that we are putting into our body. Our food is our fuel. When we eat it, we're putting fuel into our body. Look, when you put fuel into your car, you're putting the fuel into a gas tank. You're filling that up. Gas tank is actually solid. So if you kind of kept on filling it up, the clicker didn't exist, the gas would run out of the side, down the side of the car, run your tires, pile on your shoes, and you'd be standing in a dangerous, toxic, flammable mess. Well, in your body, our body's fuel tanks are actually our fat cells, adipose cells. And kind of good for us. They're not rigid like a car's fuel tank. They're not made out of metal. They're stretchy. And that's why fat cells, when you load them with fuel, can stretch. A small cell can turn into a big fat cell. In fact, they can expand 3 times, so 300%. And when that fat tank is filled up, guess what? Go to the neighbor and fill up that fat tank. Oh, you're still eating? Let's fill up the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Oh, you're still eating. Not done yet? All right, we're out of fat fuel tanks. Guess what? Let's go ahead and bust out the stem cells, fat stem cells, and make some new fuel tanks, all right? So you can use stem cells to create new fat fuel tanks, and then you fill that up and again and again and again. And that's why portion control is important, because if you eat nonstop, you're just going to keep on filling up and growing more and more and more fuel tanks, which are fat cells, which expand, and that's how you build up body fat. Excess body fat, day in and day out, week after week, month after month. You're overeating, you are going to pile on a gigantic amount of excess, unnecessary fuel tank for all the fuel that you're putting in your body. Don't put that much fuel in. You don't need that much fuel, all right? So even when it comes to bread, even healthier breads, like sourdough or whole grain breads, all right, or sprouted grain breads, portion control matters. And by the way, if you're at that restaurant and they're handing you the bread, you can nibble at it a little bit, but don't eat the whole thing, all right? And by the way, one of the things about bread is that, it's tempting to like slather it with butter is usually what they give you at a restaurant. But, if you take a look at how they do it in the Mediterranean, they'll pour a little extra virgin olive oil and you can mop up the bread or mop up the olive oil with the bread. It tastes really, really great. Okay. Just eat moderately. A piece or two, small piece or two is fine. Eating half a hunk of the bread that's there, too much of a carb load. Just be mindful, right? You don't want to grow extra body fat. You don't want to load more fuel in your body than your fuel tanks can handle it. And you're not trying to get there. You're not eating the bread in order with a goal of gaining weight. All right. So think about bread as a complement to your meal, not the main event. That's really important to think about. All right. That's my first one big tip about bread eating. What my second tip? All right. And that is actually be careful what you eat the bread with. All right. Now, if you were a kid, you probably remember eating bread with peanut butter and jelly, highly processed. Okay. Both the peanut butter and the jelly. They've got added sugars, and some of you have artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, all that kind of stuff, artificial preservatives. You don't want that. Not a good partner for your bread, obviously. Another pairing from childhood, processed meats. Remember when you were a kid? The bologna sandwich, the salami sandwich, the sliced ham sandwich, all right, between two fluffy layers of white bread, with some mayonnaise. That's not real mayonnaise. It's ultra-processed mayonnaise, trans fat mayonnaise. My gosh, times have changed. We now know that deli meats are processed meats that have been shown and declared by the World Health Organization as a class 1 carcinogen. There's convincing evidence that these deli meats and other kind of processed meats increase the risk of cancer, especially colon cancer. That's by the World Health Organization. All right.
Hey there. I've got something important to share with you, and that is my guide to the 3 healthy foods that you might want to avoid if you're looking for longevity. Many products that are marketed as nutritious can actually undermine your health. And if you want to find out more about these sneaky ingredients and how to make better choices, then just click on the link below the video for all the details. It's very important to know what's really in your food. And this resource that I'm giving you gives you a head start. Get it right now for free in the description below. Or you can access the guide by scanning the QR code on the screen with your smartphone. Now, let's jump back into the video.
So, deli sandwiches, not such a great choice. All right. Look, if you're going to eat the sandwich every now and then, it's probably all right. I very rarely eat sandwiches, like those kinds of sandwiches. You can build a much healthier sandwich than just loading it up with deli slices. All right. But what else could you do with a slice of bread, like sourdough bread? You could make an avocado toast. All right. So mash an avocado up. You want to make it tasty, sprinkle with some chili flakes, squeeze a little lemon juice on it, spread it right onto a piece of bread, toasted bread. That's really good, right? Like avocado bread spread. I mentioned this on one of my other videos that I made, like how do I make a quick meal for myself, like a quick lunch if I'm busy. So in my other video, I was talking about healthy snacks that'd be cancer fighting. I talked about tinned seafood, like tinned fish or tinned clams or octopus or things like that. They all contain omega-3 fatty acids, which are healthy, and they're usually packed in extra virgin olive oil. You can see some of them that are packed in water, but oftentimes they have extra virgin olive oil and some herbs and spices, and the omega-3s are there. So these are like immediately steam cooked seafoods that are packed in kind of a marinade and sealed into a can. You can stick them in your closet, in your pantry. They can stay there for a year, more than a year, maybe up to 5 years, and they're still good, right? So, but they're super convenient because if I don't have time for lunch, but I'm looking for something healthy to eat, or maybe somebody pops over to my house and I'm trying to come up with something healthy. Oh, got a loaf of sourdough bread. All right. One thing I could actually do is make a fish sandwich, a seafood sandwich, and if you don't want to make the sandwich, make that avocado sliced bread with avocado smear on it. All right, add a little chili, squeeze a lemon, open a tin of fish, or take out the tin of fish. You can eat it together. Now you got a great source of protein with the fish, healthy fats, omega-3s. Now you actually got the dietary fiber, because not only does sourdough actually contain dietary fiber, but the avocado's got great dietary fiber. So you got a probiotic bread with dietary fiber avocado. All right, you got a little bit of limonene and citrus bioactive from the squeeze of lemon. What's not to like? It's really, really great. And then whatever else is in the seafood that they're actually packing with, usually herbs and spices, also light up your health defenses. Now, I talk all about my health defenses in an online course that I teach called Eat to Beat Disease course. If you want to learn all about that, I suggest you take my course. All right, but we're back to bread. All right, I'm just telling you, there are lots of tasty ways that you can actually eat bread, how you eat bread, what you eat it with, how much you eat. Those are all really important ones. Now, I'm going to kind of wrap up this video by talking about some of the questions that people always ask me. Like, one of the questions that I always get asked is, hey, Dr. Lee, what's the deal with gluten? Should I avoid gluten altogether? I don't think I'm allergic to gluten, but I know that my friends are all stop eating gluten, and they said they feel great. Okay, now bread's got gluten in it because it's made with wheat, all right? But let me just tell you that the issue about gluten, even though it's a buzzword today, and a lot of people are avoiding it because they're hearing that it should be avoided, I want to set the record straight. So what is gluten? Well, gluten is a protein, okay? And a protein that is found in wheat, it's found in barley, it's found in rye. Actually, gluten is actually what gives bread its distinctive structure, its chewy texture. That's all because of gluten, all right? Now, for the vast majority of people, eating gluten is completely safe. Doesn't need to be avoided at all. And it doesn't trigger all kinds of weird autoimmune diseases and everything else. That's the fear factor that gets put out. Food in the influencer world on the internet is either, the devil or the angel. Not quite so easy. In fact, avoiding gluten, if you don't have a medical reason like celiac disease or gluten intolerance, actually you might miss out on some of the essential nutrients that are found in whole grain breads. Like whole grain breads, they also have vitamin B, different vitamins and minerals. And so just avoiding gluten altogether, you're probably cutting out not just the gluten, but other things that you probably would find beneficial in your body. But that said, for people who do have celiac disease or even gluten sensitivity, we call that non-celiac gluten sensitivity, gluten actually is a protein, can trigger some health issues, right? Now, I talked about celiac disease, I mentioned it, so let me explain what it is. Celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where anytime you eat gluten, it goes out to your intestines, it triggers basically not just an allergic response, but an immune, like a really robust immune response, aggressive immune response that damages your small intestines. A lot of damage in the small intestines. Man, is that painful. All right. Makes you throw up. You got to get rid of all that gluten in your body, in your gut. And basically, if you keep on damaging your small intestines, it's going to lead to malabsorption of important nutrients. All right. And this is going to cause not only belly pain and cramping and gassing and bloatiness, but it's also, actually can cause fatigue and it can actually cause depression as well. So for those people, avoiding gluten-free diet actually is super, super important from a health perspective, maybe even necessary. Okay. But if you don't have a celiac type of condition, autoimmune type of conditions, there's really no scientific evidence that suggests that gluten is the devil and cutting it out is what everybody should actually be doing. All right. So I like to actually talk about the nuances of things, okay, so this might not be good here, but so what should we be doing? What's a reasonable person's approach to thinking about it? So first of all, most people can eat gluten, and gluten doesn't cause an allergy in everybody. But sometimes gluten can be triggering. And the other thing I need to tell you is that gluten products often contain other things that are actually triggering your allergy, right? This is like the ultra-processed foods. And you want to be careful with those that you don't actually call gluten the culprit of your gut problems, and it's all the other additives that are actually put in there, right? So just be careful about that. The other thing you should just be aware of is a lot of gluten-free products are actually even more processed. We're trying to avoid ultra-processed food, but in the effort to actually get rid of the gluten, they're now really ultra-processing it. And they're also removing the fiber and also the micronutrients that you'd find in just regular whole gluten-containing bread, all right? That's just the thing that you should know about it. So what's my kind of like my top line thought? Well, first of all, If you have a medical reason to avoid gluten, sure, try to avoid it. All right. You want to focus on your health and longevity, of course. If you want to try being gluten-free because you know somebody who's tried it, who says that it's the best thing since sliced bread, literally. All right. And when you try it and you find that, in fact, you're feeling better, keep with it. Because, in fact, you might actually have a gluten intolerance that you didn't know about.